This tutorial will cover how to create this mold shape for a one-sided wheel using the Surface workspace in Fusion 360. We have seen teams at the Rover competition that have had one-sided wheels in the past. There's the area around the spokes, comes down to the rim, but at the rim, the spoke is only on one side and the entire other side is wide open. Looking at from the other angle, at the center of the hub, there's some deep ridges and valleys for stiffness. As the spoke comes down, it hits the outside of the wheel and the entire inside is open. So this mold is set up to create a wheel like that using carbon fiber. This bottom mold is the shape that we'll be working on making using the Surface tutorial. This top part, there's a right-hand side and a left-hand side. These get bolted together so that the tread of the tire can be laid in this curve. The spokes get laid in the valley, and then these are open, and the center part is the hub with carbon fiber in it. These are the spokes that got laid in the valleys. This is carbon fiber getting laid. You can see the top right-hand part, the top left-hand part of the mold, and the bottom part. With the tread curving all the way around, we wanted to have a way to get this top mold off. So that's why it's a three-part mold, the bottom and the two tops. So the first thing we'll do is we'll use the Surface workspace to design this shape. This is our one-sided carbon fiber wheel, kind of a mock-up of what we came up with. If you look at the other bottom side, you can see that it truly is just a super thin shell of what the carbon fiber would look like. And we'll talk about how to model that. The first thing is we'll get the shape, and then we'll need to create a plug that will look like this solid blue piece. And then when we get rid of the plug, this is the shape that we will put into the CNC and create the mold. Our plug is a solid object. It has the surface of our carbon fiber wheel, but to be able to carve this on the mold, we had to fill in some of these spaces. So we'll go ahead and jump in. We'll get rid of this. Make sure you are in the proper folder. As always, we want to start out saving this. This is our first time working in the Surface workspace. So I'm going to call this Surface tutorial model. And this is the third time I've done this. Practice makes perfect. So we've got this saved. Make sure that it comes up in your proper folder, and we'll go ahead and get rid of that so that we've got enough real estate to work with. First thing we'll do, we'll go ahead and make sure that you're working in inches. I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch. We'll do it on this right plane right here. First thing I'm going to do is create a 12-inch line. And this is going to help us set the diameter of our wheel. I want to make sure that that's horizontal. And then we're also going to turn that line into a construction line. So I'm going to select this and then turn it into a construction line. After we've got that, we're going to go ahead and draw an ellipse. We'll put the center point of the ellipse at the end point of that line. Our ellipse will come out and we'll say it's going to be 2 inches wide. We'll click there and then we'll come up and type in 4 and hit enter. So we've got an ellipse that's 4 inches tall. If you want to put the dimensions on, you can. And 2 inches wide. This section right here is going to be the profile. That's going to be the shape of our tire that's in contact with the ground. We don't need this entire ellipse. We actually need to cut away part of it. The ellipse creates these construction lines when it's made. We can't use these to cut the ellipse, so we'll have to come in here with the line tool and create a line out to the side. You can see it's a solid line now. We'll create another solid line going straight down. And then we'll come up here and grab the trim tool. And now we can cut away that bottom part of the ellipse. And it kind of removed some of those constraints. That's totally fine. And even though we just drew these lines, we want to cut and trim, get rid of those lines as well. Okay, so I think that's good for that sketch. We're going to finish that sketch. Go back to our view. And the nice thing about working in the surface space, so usually work on solid. I'm going to go over now and click to surface. I'm going to go ahead and click on the revolve command. And when you're in the solid workspace, you have to have a closed profile. But when you're in the surface workspace, you don't need a closed profile. So I can, under my profile, I can grab this 3/4 of an ellipse. It's not the complete ellipse. I can select my axis as our z-axis back here. And you can see that it revolved that incomplete profile all the way around. You can control how far it's going to rotate that profile. We're going to go the whole 360. And we're just going to create that as a new body and say OK. And that is the rim of our tire. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a construction plane. We're going to do an offset plane. We're going to come off of this front face. We're going to scoot that back. I'm just going to type in 12 inches. If you look at it, that plane is going to be right through the center of what was our ellipse when we started. So that's going to be 12 inches out. And that's why we started with that 12-inch line. So I'll make a construction plane out there. Also create another construction plane. This one is just going to be 1 inch right there in the center. Now that we've got those two construction planes, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to go to my bodies folder. I'm going to turn off this body just for a moment. So I just have my two sketch planes. And we go ahead and we're going to draw a couple more ellipses. So go here to our creator sketch. I'm going to go out here to this second plane. I'm going to do another ellipse. Keep the center at the origin. This one's going to be 8 inches wide. And I think this is going to be 4 inches tall. That looks pretty good. And the same thing, we only need the top half of this ellipse. So I'm going to draw some. These lines won't let me, if I try to do the cut tool and cut this, it cuts the whole thing. This construction line doesn't cut this in half. So I'm going to need to draw a line in here to cut it in half, which is going to separate the two halves. I can now use the trim tool to get rid of the bottom. And I'm also going to get rid of the line that I use. So now I just have this arc. I like this arc because it's nice and flat and horizontal here where the tire would be hitting the ground. But then it also kind of comes down vertical right here on the edges. And that's going to give us a lot of stiffness in our carbon fiber tire. So we'll finish that sketch. Come back to our perspective model. So this is kind of out here. This sketch is out here at the rim of our wheel. We're going to use this other construction plane. We're going to create a sketch on this construction plane, the nearby one. We're going to do another ellipse. We're going to cut it in half like we did the other one. This one, we'll put the center right here. This one is only going to be 0.5 wide. It's only going to be ½ inch. This is going to be close to the hub. And it's also going to be 2 inches tall. So I'm typing those dimensions in, and I'm clicking the mouse to place them, and then it goes on to the next dimension. So I'm going to drag this 0.5 up and this 2 out of the way. And same thing, we're going to draw another line right across the middle to cut this in half. so we can get rid of the bottom half and then get rid of our line. So this is still another ellipse, but this one is much skinnier. And we'll finish the sketch, go back to our view, and now you can see we've got this really wide, flat ellipse and this skinny ellipse right here. Skinny ellipse. And so what we're going to do, I'll go ahead and turn the body on, is we're going to use those two line segments, and that's why the Surface Workspace is so nice, is because you don't have to have a complete closed profile. We're going to come in here into the Loft menu, and then there's a Loft tool in the Solid Workspace as well. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to loft this blue line into this blue line. And it's going to create that surface from this profile, go to this profile. We're just going to hit OK. And that's going to be one of the spokes of our wheels. We've got a lot of stuff to kind of clean up and make look a little bit nicer. But that's what we're going to do. This silver side is one side of our surface. The gold side is the other side. I want to have both of these facing the same way. So I'm going to come over here to the Modify tool, come down to where it says Reverse Normal, and that's going to flip the surface over. So I'm going to select this tool. It asks me to pick a face. I'm going to click on this spoke and say OK. And now this silver side and this silver side are both facing the same way. So we'll go ahead and do that. I don't need any of this business underneath here, so we're going to use the Trim tool again. And this time, it's going to ask us to select the Trim tool. And I want this spoke to cut this rim. So I've got my Trim tool selected, and then now I can come in here, select that section of the face of what I want cut, and when I hit OK, that section goes away. We still have these flanges sticking out, so I'm using the Trim tool. This time I'm going to select the rim, and I want the rim to cut away this section and that section over there. It's already turned red, so I'm going to hit OK. And now we don't have any of that extension past the rim of our wheel. This spoke comes out, and when it hits the rim, it doesn't pass through there. We trim those away, and we've just got a nice... Oops, so sorry. Let me rotate that. We've got a nice clean edge where this spoke meets the rim of our wheel. So now that we've got that, we kind of trimmed underneath it. We're going to put in the rest of our spokes. So we can go ahead and create a circular pattern to do that. We're just going to leave this on faces. I want to do this face about this center axis. We decided to start out with 6 spokes, make our wheel nice and strong, and we can go from there. So we'll go ahead and hit OK, and it's made all 6 of those spokes. Now if we kind of peek underneath here, we can see that the spokes don't intrude into the rim, but the rim section is still there. So we're going to go ahead and need to cut all of those out and trim those out again. So we're going to go ahead, use the Trim tool. I'm going to use this spoke to get rid of that section. I'm going to say OK. I'm going to kind of rotate around my cube, do the same thing. If you're going to use the same command over and over again, if you right click out here in space, it brings up this marking menu, and if I slide my mouse upward, it goes to Repeat Trim, and just starts over that same exact tool. So I'm going to use the spoke to get rid of part of that rim section and say OK. And once again, I'm going to rotate my model. I'm going to take my right mouse and just go straight up, and it goes right back to that Trim tool. So I'm going to select this spoke to trim the rim, say OK. Right mouse click and upwards to repeat to trim. Hit the spoke and cut out the rim section, say OK. Rotate my model around again. And if you don't have a mouse, if you're using the trackpad, you can always just go back up here and start the Trim tool again. Let's say you're going to use the spoke to get rid of that part of the rim and say OK. So you can start to see how we're starting to get this shape of what we would like our wheel to be. We use the ellipse to create this rim profile, and then two ellipses to loft this surface between each other. This is a little bit flatter out here at the rim, and this is a little bit steeper. Trying to make this shape in the solid workspace would be incredibly difficult since none of these are closed profiles. Okay, so we trimmed all those things. What we're going to want to do eventually is we're going to put a fillet between this surface and this surface. But right now, since those are different surfaces, if you try to fillet it, it won't let you select that line. What we need to do is we need to take this surface and stitch it together to all the other surfaces. So we're going to come over here to the stitch tool. We're going to select the rim, and it says, hey, here's all these options, and we're going to select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can see the green lines where it's going to go ahead and stitch those together. And instead of having 7 different bodies now, when I stitch them together, it combines it into one body. So now these are, this is one surface, one body once again. So we stitch that. So I think we'll wait a little bit to put the fillet on. We're going to keep working on the center of our hub. So I'm going to go back to my sketches. I'm going to go back into sketch number 1. I'm going to, let's go ahead and save this. Let's make sure I don't mess anything up. We'll go ahead and save that. I'm going to right click and edit sketch 1. And I want to draw a vertical line only above the line, so I'm going to make sure it snaps to the line and go straight up. And I want this line to be 2 inches above the line. So we'll hit enter so that it's 2 inches tall. And then I'm going to put the sketch dimension from the center out here to this line. And we want this to be 1.5 inches from our origin. And we're just going to just have a vertical line just sitting there. And once again, the great thing, we're going to turn that sketch on. The great thing about the Surface workspace is I can take this line, revolve it around the center, and it doesn't have to be a closed profile. So I'm going to open up the revolve command again. For my profile, I'm just going to select that straight line. And for my axis, once again, we'll go back to our center axis. That center z-axis. It's going to take that profile and just kind of sweep it, and it's going to make that center part of our wheel, which is going to end up being the hub of our carbon fiber wheel. So once we've got that revolved, we're going to hit OK. And then now you can see we need to kind of trim away all those little inside pieces. So I'm going to use the trim tool. I'm going to select this hub, this inside circle, as my trim tool. And then I'm going to start getting rid of all of these pieces here. I'm going to get my top view so I can just grab all of those. And the trim tool is going to use that surface I created to cut all of those off exactly where I wanted. Okay, so it's cut them off, but there's still this section right here, this little archway, and I want to get rid of that. I want this piece to connect to the hub. So this is another case where we'll have to trim. I want to use this spoke to trim this section of the wheel. And we're going to have to keep doing this several times. So this is where I'll use my right mouse button and go straight up to repeat the trim. I want the spoke to get rid of that section of the hub. Rotate my piece again. I want the spoke to get rid of that section of the hub. I want the spoke to cut away. Whoops. I have to start the trim tool. I want the spoke to get rid of that part of the hub. I think I got one more left. No, 2 more. Open up the trim tool. The spoke gets rid of that part of the hub. And last time, trim tool, the spoke gets rid of that part of the hub. So I think I did that right. Didn't miss anything up. So you can see now that how this is looking more and more like our what we want on our carbon fiber wheel. This will be the rim, this will be the spokes, and this will be the hub where the bearings go. So we can go ahead and turn off sketch 1. So now, same thing, we want to stitch this hub to these pieces. So we'll go up here to our stitch command. We'll grab this center hub, and then once again we're going to select. These are all connected now, so I just have to click it once, and it's going to have these options right here to stitch. We'll say OK. And once again, instead of being 2 bodies, this is now 1 body. If I select any portion of this thing, it's going to select the whole thing. So it's just one giant body. Now that we've got the rim stitched to the spokes and the spokes stitched to the hub, now we'll go ahead, we'll jump into the modify, or we can grab our fillet tool. And this is where we go ahead. I'm going to select all of these arches where those 2 surfaces came together and we stitched them together. We're going to put a fillet on there, and I think 0.7 is why worked out to be a good number. We want the slopes to be as big and as gentle as we can, so it's easy to put the carbon fiber in there, and we want these things to be nice and smooth. Anything bigger than 0.7, I think if I tried to go up to 0.8. Okay, so that worked, but we'll just, at a certain point, let's see if I can go up to 0.9. At a certain point it fails. 1 inch. Oh, I know what it was. If you come over here to the top, this starts to lose its roundness as you hit the fillet tool more and more. If I take this up to 1.5 inches, well, there it failed. You can go too far. Take that to 1.2. You can kind of see these start to flatten out a little bit. So we don't want to lose the circleness of our hub. That has to stay a circle. So that's why I just dropped that on 0.7. It looked good. It's one of the options we can change if we need to. So we'll put a 0.7 fillet there on the inside of the hub. We'll zoom out. We'll add another fillet to all of the places where the rim connects. So I'm going to grab all of those edges. And I think here, I think we went big, and I think I'll put a 2-inch fillet in. And that looks pretty good. We want all these things to be nice, smooth transitions. The smoother and more gentle it is, the easier it is to lay carbon fiber. But we still have this nice steep shape right here that will give us a lot of stiffness, and it kind of flattens out here where it hits the wheel, like we kind of saw in the Rhode Island School of Design wheel. So now we go ahead and we have all those filleted. So this looks like we want our carbon fiber wheel to look. Since this is a surface, it's a plane, it's infinitely thin. So there is a command. We'll go ahead and show it to you. We're not going to use it. There's a command on the create tool where you can come down here to say thicken. And you can take this infinitely thin surface, click on it, and we can put in a thickness, a depth to it. Type in 0.125, type in 1/8 of an inch. And instead of being infinitely thin, now it's got some thickness to it. It turned it from a surface where it's just a sheet of a material, and now it's turned it into a solid 3-dimensional object. And when I was prototyping these, I would 3D print these shells. We can also come up here to our dimension, kind of look at the inside. This surface was on the inside and it kind of thickened it to the outside. We can also drop in here and put a negative sign. Oops. I'm working too fast, my computer's not happy with me. Give this a second, see if it'll recover. Oh no. Okay, let me pause this and see if I can get it to come back. Okay, I just had to pause it and wait for a moment for it to come back. Come over here to create and down to the thicken. We selected our surface and we did 0.125. and then add thickness to the outside. We can also come in here and add a negative sign in front of this. And instead of thickening to the outside, it thickens to the inside. And since it just depends what you're doing of how you want to do it. But this is not what we want to do. We cannot take this shape and make our mold out of that shape. We need these flat surfaces to tell the CNC where to cut. So even though this is a more accurate representation of what our wheel is going to look like, we are not going to use this thicken command. So I'm going to go ahead and say cancel. We're going to stay here with our surface tool, and we're going to go a different route to turn this into a solid body. Even though these are going to be open on the wheel, we need to close these in as flat surfaces so it'll help us make our model. So we're going to come up here to this tool. This is the patch tool. Select this. If you select a group of edges, it's going to fill it in and patch it, just like the tool says. So hit OK. And once again, you can only do one hole at a time. So this is where instead of going for the patch tool every time and selecting that edge and hitting OK, I'm going to use my right mouse button, go up and hit repeat patch, select it, and hit enter for good. So it just helps me move a little bit quicker if I'm doing the same tool over and over again. So I've patched all those. I'm going to right click up to get the patch surface. I'm going to grab this circle at the top. We're going to close off the top of our hub. And we are even going to come around to the bottom side. And say, okay, that was for that patch over there. Repeat the patch, grab this one, and it's going to close off that bottom side as well. And when we hit OK, you can't really see it, but it's going to turn this into a solid body. If I go ahead and use the inspect command for a section analysis and pick this plane, oop, I've got to flip the normals, so sorry. Let me go back, I got ahead of myself. I'm going to come here to modify. We did this before, we're going to reverse the normals. I need all the gray sides to be sticking out. So I'm going to grab all of these that are kind of that gold color, not the bottom. And I'm going to reverse the normal on all those faces. So now that they're all silver. And now that they're all silver, let me see if that, look at our inspect section analysis. Look at that face. Oh, and it did not close it in. So let me go ahead. Oh, I know what I need to do. So sorry. I need to stitch this together. That's my problem. Because I made these surfaces, but they're not connected to everything else. Okay. So let's go ahead and stitch. I want this surface stitched to all of these. And we're going to kind of roll it over and stitch that bottom size closed as well. And now that it's stitched together, let's see if that turned it into a solid body. There it is. Since this is a complete stitched together watertight surface, it's going to fill the inside as a solid object. And when I was working on prototyping, I went ahead and 3D printed this shape as well. This was a lot easier to 3D print. Wanted to see what this surface looked like in real life. It's nice to see things in CAD, but I also like to see things in real life. So this is our model of our wheel. We're going to call this a plug. That's what it's called. Oh, I started a sketch somehow. I'm going to go ahead and hit finish sketch. I want to double click and name that plug. That's what that's called when we're making models. Okay, so now that I've got this as a solid object, we'll go ahead and save it. So hopefully I won't jack anything else up. And in this sketch 4, we never really used this, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete this. That was just an errant sketch. But that's actually what the next thing we're going to do. I just want to make sure I've got the correct plane selected. Now that we've got this, We can jump back to the solid workspace up here. I'm going to create a sketch. I want to do it on this top plane. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the plug. Select this plane right here. I'm going to do a center rectangle. And I know we'll go ahead and put the origin at the origin. And I know that our line was 12 inches, but the ellipse was 2 inches wide, so it went an inch past, so that our wheel is going to be 26 inches in diameter. So we'll go ahead and make this, you can kind of turn the plug on back to see how big it is. But I want this to be nice and big, so we're going to go 36 by 36 on this square to make sure that our piece of foam and our mold is going to be large enough. Going to finish that sketch. I want to make sure that when I extrude this, I extrude it over top of this area here. So I hit extrude, grab, turn off the plug, grab this whole rectangle. It's going to come up 4 inches. This is going to be the big piece of foam that we would eventually mill on the CNC router to make the mold. So we'll hit OK. So now we've got our second body. One body is the plug. That's the shape of the wheel, and the second body is going to be our mold. So let me turn that back on. And you can see how this piece of foam, which is going to be our mold, go ahead and call this the mold. This piece is inset exactly halfway. I use the center plane, so this top half is stuck inside of here. So all we have to do now is come into the combine command. The target body is going to be this big piece of what will eventually be foam. Our tool body is this thing that has the shape of our wheel. And instead of joining, we're going to go ahead and say cut it out. I want this wheel to cut its shape into that piece of foam, and we want to keep our plug, so we'll hit OK. And when I do that, it doesn't look like that much happened until we're going to kind of come around here, look at it this way, and if I turn off the plug, turn off the visibility, you can see that in that giant rectangle, I have now cut out the negative shape of our mold. And this is exactly what we needed to do. This is the piece of foam that I cut to make our mold for the carbon fiber wheel. This top piece is were the next step, but this tutorial is to show you how to use the Surface workspace to create a really interesting and kind of organic shape. I'm going to scroll back, don't freak out. How to create this. This is really infinitely thin sheet, but because you can extrude and rotate the open profiles, it's much easier to create this in the Surface workspace than it is anywhere else. And then once we have this mold, we went ahead and thickened it out and made it all the way into a solid part. And then we used this solid part. We created just a big rectangle. This is just a big foam chunk. And we use that wheel plug, use the combine tool to create our foam model. So that's what we would use to cut on the CNC router, and that's what we would use to make our one-sided carbon fiber wheel. Thanks so much. If you have any questions, just email me, and I hope it goes well. Thank you so much.